A Winter's Tale by Sarah Hudson, read by the author who has no prior experience. Prologue: The Fire. Benny had given up calling for help. He huddled in the corner of the room, gasping for breath. He didn't cry. He was too scared. He didn't really understand what had happened. He'd been at Tom's apartment. He remembered that much. Then he'd come home, and it was all a bit of a blur from there. He remembered a horrible, shrieking alarm that had sent him cowering in the corner and calling for his mother, but she hadn't come. And then it got hotter and hotter, and the air burned his nose, and Benny could not get out of the apartment. He'd tried, but it was even hotter out in the halls, and the elevator wasn't working. He'd panicked, and so he'd come back here, hoping that someone would miss him and come searching. No one had. Benny coughed, his body shaking violently. He could hear sounds through the walls of his apartment, crackling sounds, burning sounds. He wished they would go away. There was smoke creeping over his ceiling. He didn't know from where. He just wanted to fall asleep and find out all of this was just a bad dream. Fall asleep. Out of nowhere, Benny's door shattered and a monster stepped through. Benny choked on his scream. He was going to die. He trembled as the monster lumbered toward him, unable to even make himself fight back. The monster pulled off its face and pressed it to Benny's own. He thrashed, trying to push the thing away. "It's all right, Benny. I'm here to help you. Breathe for me. Come on." Benny couldn't help it anymore. He took a gasping breath and felt clean, pure air rush into his lungs. "That's it," the man said. "I'm going to get you out of here, son." He swung Benny up over his shoulder and headed from the room. The hallway was black with smoke. The fireman, he had to be a fireman, didn't he? Went straight into it, carrying Benny with him. It was so hot. Benny coughed, dropping the mask he clutched to his face, and the searing heat hit his lungs. He could hear the man carrying him gasping for air. They would never make it. Then Benny heard the crackling sound from above. He tried to call a warning, but it was too late. He could only watch, helpless, as the ceiling fell through them. It should have hit them both, should have crushed them, but it was like the falling debris wasn't even there. The fireman plunged on through the smoke and the flames, but Benny didn't worry anymore. Benny had passed out. Chapter 1: A Long Day. "Slow down, boys. Carl, don't touch that. Becky, baby, please let go of Mommy's leg. We're going to see Daddy right now, and he is just fine. Annabelle, would you take the baby for a moment? Thank you." Carol Winters was an anomaly among mothers, and not just because she had cheerfully given birth to 7 children. If you were to ask her friends what they found most unbelievable about her, they wouldn't have had to think about it for long. For one thing, her house was, if not spotless, at least always tidy. Her children were mostly polite and often clean. And she was never late. For anything. That certainly included visiting her husband at the hospital. Carol ushered the rest of her brood into the elevator. "Now, which floor was it again?" "The 3rd, her oldest said. "Thank you, Annabelle." Becky tugged on her mother's jeans. "Can I push the button, Mommy?" "Yes, of course you can." "Carl!" The older boy had lunged forward and pushed the button for the 3rd floor before Carol could stop him. "My button!" Becky wailed as the elevator doors closed. "That was totally uncalled for, Carl," Carol said severely. "Apologize to your sister." Carl widened his eyes innocently. "But you said I could push the button." It was Becky's voice, perfect down to the whimper at the end. Carol was not impressed. "Carl, you know the rules. You use your own voice in the hospital, and you answer for your own actions wherever you are. Now you will apologize to Becky or—" The elevator dinged, and Carol changed her sentence. "We will talk about this at home. Now let's go see your father. Twins, you keep hold of Carl." All 8 of them tumbled out of the elevator and headed down the hall. Despite her assurances to her children, Carol felt her anxiety building. If Hammer was fine, why was he in the hospital? It had been a bad fire. She'd heard enough about it to know that. Annabelle's hand touched her shoulder. "He's fine," she said softly. "He said so on the phone. He's just fine." Carol found herself nodding. Yes, of course he is." She walked in silence for a moment, then shot her daughter a look. "But what I said to Carl goes for you too, Annabelle. None of that in the hospital." Annabelle bit her lip. Sorry, I didn't mean to. I know. It was hard for Carol, too. She could see the clock on the wall. They were going to be just a minute later than she'd planned. If she could stretch that minute, just by a little. No, she told herself, no tweaking time until we get home again. Hammer was already risking a visit from Shar. There was no need to make things worse. A crackling sound from behind caught Carol's attention, and her head whipped around. Zach! Her 16-year-old flinched, sparks jumping from his hair. Put that out right now! She swatted at his head, then yelped as the electric shock ran through her body. Sorry, Zach mumbled, brushing at his hair. The pyrotechnics immediately stopped. This place is freaky. Only to you, Susan said. I've been here loads of times. I bet I still hold the hospital record for the highest fever. That is not something to be proud of, Carol snapped. Children, your father is just up ahead, and there may well be a room full of strangers with him. Zach, do something about your hair. Becky, shirt out of mouth. Aaron, don't eat it if it's not food. I don't care how hungry you are. Annabelle, give me the baby. Annabelle obeyed, and Carol found herself holding a bright pink snowsuit with nothing visible inside it. She sighed, bouncing the baby in her arms. Maggie, baby, come on, peekaboo. The snowsuit burbled happily. A trail of saliva leaked down its front. Ma. That's right, baby, Mommy's here. Now go visible so we can go see Daddy. Maggie stayed resolutely invisible. Well, that was why they'd brought the snowsuit. Carol pulled the hood tightly over the invisible curls and adjusted the scarf and mitts. Now only a tiny sliver of her daughter's face was visible, or not so visible, as the case might be. Good enough. Let's go in. And Carl, please turn off the theatrics. We are not here to make a sensation. We'll need you to keep this wrapped until your doctor says otherwise, the nurse said as she finished bandaging Hammer's arm. Is the boy okay? He is going to be just fine. She smiled. You're a hero, Mr. Winters. Hammer managed a weak smile in return. My family, are they here yet? I don't think so, but I'm sure they'll be here. Daddy! A small figure catapulted through the door, running straight at Hammer. I suppose that answers that. The nurse moved toward the door. You're free to go with your family now. Call us if there are any problems. Hammer barely had time to nod before his family flooded the room. Daddy! Becky repeated, tugging at his hand. Daddy? Hello, monkey. Hammer tried to embrace her, but she wriggled away, wrinkling her nose. You smell. Was it a bad fire, Dad? Aaron jumped in. I heard the whole building came down. Not quite, Hammer said. Close, though. How hot was it? Sue demanded. How hot? A couple 100 degrees. She huffed. I can only do 130. Did you really go all the way up to the 6th floor, Dad? Don't be stupid, Carl. There are only 5 floors in the building. Was it the 5th, Dad? Of course it was the 6th, Hammer's voice sneered. Sue is an idiot. Carl, Hammer warned, don't you start. He trailed off as Carol finally made it through the crowd to his side. She had the baby on her hip, face hidden on her shoulder. Probably stuck on invisible again. Normally, that would have made Hammer smile. Now his heart sank. Hey, he said limply. Hey. The expression on her face was hard to read. No, she was not just going to let this go. He shouldn't even hope for it. She had good reason to be angry. Listen, Carol, I'm sorry, but that kid would have died. He's 10 years old, Carol, Carl's age. How would you have felt if it were our Carl? Wasn't there anyone else who could save him? Hammer threw his hands up in the air. Nobody else was going to risk going into that building. It was coming down on top of us. But you went. Yeah, I did. And did the building come down on top of you? Hammer shifted uncomfortably. It must not have. I'm here, right? Not for long, you aren't. Carol turned, pulling Aaron's hand away from the roll of bandages on the counter. All right, children, we are going home. Then, looking back over at her husband, we have a hero to feed. Hammer could hardly believe the relief that swept through him at that statement. His wife forgave him. She was letting him off just this once. Now, he just had to hope that the government would do the same. Supper will be ready in exactly 10 minutes, Carol said, firmly escorting her 6-year-old to the door. You can clean your room until then. But I don't want supper, Becky wailed. I want ice cream. Sorry, monkey, no ice cream before dinner. Now out with you. The little girl sulked out of the kitchen and Carol turned back to the stove. The tomato sauce was cooking nicely and the spaghetti was nearly done. She warped the fabric of time just a little more around them, making sure they would finish simultaneously, then checked the garlic bread in the oven. Would you like me to set the table, Mom? That would be lovely, Annabelle. Make it look special. We have a celebration. The second best plates. That sounds great. Then come back here and give me a hand with the food, will you? Will do. Annabelle disappeared into the next room, and Carol headed to the sink, rolling up her sleeves. If she timed it right, she could get a few of the dishes washed before the food was done. She turned the tap and heard a shriek from upstairs. Carol switched off the water and looked up at the ceiling. For a moment, there was nothing. Then something hit the floor upstairs with a thump, and there was another shriek. An angry one. With a sigh, Carol shook the water from her hands. Annabelle, I'm going upstairs. Don't worry about the food. I'll be back in a minute. Without waiting for a response, she marched up the stairs. On the landing, the source of the shrieks was immediately apparent. Susan. Dare you! I'm going to kill you this time, Aaron! That was my best nail polish! In between words, she pummeled her younger brother with her fists. Enough, Carol called. Susan jerked around, her eyes blazing. Susan, get off your brother! Aaron, get up. What happened here? Susan's face flushed even redder with rage. He, she said, jabbing a finger at her brother, ate my best nail polish again. Carol looked at her son. Is that true? I was hungry. That is no excuse. Apologize to your sister. I'm sorry, Sue. Good. Carol started back down the stairs. And Sue, you leave him alone. But what about my nail polish? Susan demanded, brandishing her fingernails. I was only half finished. Carol looked back. If Aaron swallowed it, it's gone for good now. The two of you can discuss appropriate restitution. Unless you want to be living on dirt for the next week, Aaron, you will make it good. Susan, that goes for you too. Violence is not an acceptable solution to your problems. Yes, ma'am, Susan said, shoving Aaron in the ribs. I mean it. I have had about all I will take from you two. Your father could have died today. The least you can do is let him have his well-earned rest. Carol waited until both of them had grudgingly nodded before she went back down to the kitchen. Hammer was there. She halted, trying not to show how flustered she was. How much she hated sending him into those fires. What if next time he didn't come back? Carol shook off the thought. She had a household to run. She couldn't afford the luxury of worrying. Did the noise wake you? Hammer shook his head. I thought I'd come out and see if you needed some help. Well, you're right on time. Dinner's ready. I'll just carry it to the table. Let me do that. Hammer plunged his hand through the drawer and pulled out the oven mitts to take the large vat of tomato sauce into the dining room while Carol juggled the colander of spaghetti in the smaller pot. Aaron stuck his head around the doorway. Dinner's ready? Not for you unless you and your sister have made up. We did that ages ago, he said, reaching for the spaghetti. Carol slapped at his hand. Call your siblings. No one gets a bite until everyone is at the table. That was command enough for Aaron. He ran off, shouting at the top of his lungs, but not before he snagged a noodle. Aaron grabbed for the spaghetti as soon as the last child sat down to the table, but Carol stopped his hand. Grace first, Aaron. Oh, come on. Carol looked at her husband. Your mother's right, Aaron. How would you like to say it? Aaron bowed his head and rattled off a quick sentence, then dove for the pasta. No one got in his way this time. They had learned long ago not to come between that boy and anything he called food. That's enough, Aaron, Carol finally said. Leave some for the rest of us. He dropped back into his seat, devoting his energy instead to shoveling as much food as he could into his mouth, and Annabelle took up the pot herself to dish out food for her siblings. Can I feed Maggie? Carl asked, snatching at the baby's bowl. Sure, Carl, that would be great. He offered his baby sister spoonfuls of cut-up pasta, warbling in a Winnie-the-Pooh voice as he did, and Maggie clapped and laughed, shimmering in and out of sight. Carol let her gaze wander around the table as she ate, watching her children. Aaron, of course, was already on his second serving, though Annabelle had barely picked up her fork. Sue and Zach were chatting lazily about their classes, and Becky Carol frowned. Becky, honey, why aren't you eating? Becky looked up, and Carol realized to her astonishment that the child's eyes were brimming with tears. Is something wrong, Monkey? Yes. Well, what's the problem? Meatballs, Becky wailed. Meatballs are the problem. What's the matter with them? They're animals, dead animals. Becky's whole frame seemed to be shaking with her voice. Meatballs are animals. Carol's lips tightened. Who told you that? Silence held around the table as she slowly scanned each face. Then her eyes came to rest on her youngest boy, who had frozen with his own fork stuffed in his mouth and Maggie's spoon in midair. Carl. What's off me? He demanded around his mouth full of food. Pardon me, I can't hear little boys who talk with their mouths full. Carl rolled his eyes but swallowed. You always blame me for everything. Yeah, Zach said. That's because it is always you. Carl wrinkled up his nose. Nobody asked you, you great lout. You don't care about anyone. Carl, Carol exclaimed, apologize to your brother. Oh, sorry. I forgot about Alicia. Zach shot to his feet, his chair tumbling back. What did you just say? Alicia Wells, of course. She's just a girl at school. What do you know about her? I may have heard her talking about you when she came to pick up her sister. Oh, yeah? What'd she say? Nothing important. Carl smirked, twirling his fork in his spaghetti. No, you really wouldn't care. Zach's hair crackled dangerously. Tell me, now. If you insist. Carl cleared his throat and continued in a pretty female voice. You know that Winters boy? Yeah, Zach. I know he's a weirdo. I mean, he spends all his time making batteries. But lately he's been really creeping me out. I feel like he's staring at me all the time, and I have the weirdest feeling that he wrote in his journal about how much he lures me and how he's scared I'll never notice him. And Carl cut off with an authentically girlish shriek as Zach lunged across the table, his entire body snapping with electricity. Zach! Hammer leaped up from his place at the table and wrenched his two sons apart, his own body shaking with the current. Zach, cool it! My journal, Zach spluttered. Hang on, Susan said incredulously. That was real? I thought Carl was just making things up again. Since when do you keep a journal? Zach rolled on her. Shut up, he yelled. Everybody shut up! For a wonder, they did. Zach was still crackling like a thunderhead. Hammer had finally given up trying to hold him. His gaze swept the room, then latched onto his brother. You. Carl cowered behind a chair as Zach stepped toward him, but Hammer got between them, crossing his arms. Zach, control yourself. He's 10 years old. He's a spoiled brat. Carl looked over at the chair. It takes one to know one. Zach snarled, lunging forward, but his father's arm caught him in mid-leap. It was like jumping into a brick wall. Zach, that's enough, Hammer said firmly. Go to your room, now. Zach drew himself up. Fine. And with a final glare around at all of them, he left. As soon as he was out of the room, Carl hopped up. She's the most beautiful girl I've ever seen, he hollered in Zach's voice. When she dances, I don't know how to describe it. I think she might be an angel. There was a sound of breaking glass from the other room, but Zach did not return. Hammer clamped his hand over Carl's mouth. That's enough from you, too. Your brother's journal is his own business. If you do that again, Your father and I will discuss your punishment later, Carol broke in. For now, you too can go to your room. Carl pouted. I don't want to go to my room. Too bad, you're going anyway. Hammer held him by the shoulder as he led him to the door. I'll take him upstairs, Carol. Thank you, Hammer. Carol waited until they left the room before she turned to her daughter. For heaven's sake, Annabelle, why didn't you do anything? I couldn't get close enough. You don't have to touch him to calm him down. Carol hadn't been so rattled in years. Zach could have killed him. He could have. If that current got out of control. Mom, it's okay. Nothing happened. Carol wrenched her hand away from Annabelle, shaking off the traitorous sense of calm. Leave it, she said. I was just trying to... I know what you were trying to do, and I told you not to. Carol took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Annabelle. It wasn't your fault. I should have put a stop to it sooner myself. Now... She hesitated, sniffing the air. Something's burning. What? Something's burning! Susan, if you left your hair iron on again... I haven't touched it all afternoon, Susan said, wiggling her fingers. Nails, remember? Then what could... The garlic bread. With a choked cry, Carol dashed into the kitchen and yanked open the oven. Clouds of black smoke billowed out, engulfing her, and she closed it again, coughing. Annabelle! She called as she switched off the oven. Open the windows before... Too late. Fire alarms all over the house went off. The lights flickered madly as the sound reached Zach's attic bedroom. And then Becky shrieked, covering her ears. She hated loud noises. Aaron started shouting something that Carol couldn't hear over the noise. The baby started to cry. And that was when the phone rang. Carol made her way across the kitchen, coughing in the smoke, and picked it up. Annabelle had finished opening all the windows and was madly fanning the air, trying to blow the smoke away from the detector. Hello? Carol moved away from the alarm, trying to shield it from the sound. Yes, this is Carol Winters. The dining room fell silent, everyone holding their breath. It had to be Shar. Superhuman advisement and relocation was a branch of government not many people knew about. But to families like the Winters, it was both protector and tyrant. Shar preserved the secret of superhumans, preventing the chaos and violence that usually ensued when people discovered that their neighbors had supernatural powers. But they had all the authority, and there were strict rules about the proper use of power. If they decided Hammer's rescue of the morning broke those rules, he would have to pay a hefty fine. And if they thought his cover was in danger, the whole family would have to move. But Carol didn't look worried. Instead, she looked irritated. Excuse me, who is this? No, as I already told your colleagues, my husband does not talk to the media. Hammer walked into the kitchen. What about me? Carol rolled her eyes at him, gesturing to the phone. No, he won't reconsider. I am sorry, Mr. Payne, is it? I'm sorry, Mr. Payne, but we can't help you. Goodbye. She hung up the phone, shaking her head in disbelief, and began trying to clean up the mess that was her kitchen. What was that? Hammer asked. It looks like your heroism is coming back to haunt us. Some journalist wants to write your story for posterity. You're kidding. No, he seems quite enthusiastic about it. But you told him no. Hammer checked. Of course I did, as if we need more trouble from Shar. Her husband gave her a sideways look. Criticizing Shar now, Carol? Fine, Hammer, I admit it. I'm sick of them messing with our lives. Isn't that going to cause problems with your family? Your dad is an operative. A retired operative, Carol corrected. What about your brother? Last I heard he was still working for them. Warren? Hammer, you've got to be kidding me. He works for Shar because he likes watching them squirm when he breaks regulations. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like your mother. No one is like my mother. I'll never be anti-Shar. They do a lot of good. But yes, I think they need to take a step back. And if they want us to relocate, well, I'll have something to say about it. Thanks, Carol. That means a lot from you. It shouldn't. You're my husband after all, and they're just... Carol suddenly started to cry. Oh, Hammer, what are we going to do? I can't move again. I can't. And the kids, it's not just us this time. Hammer, they all have lives and friends. They're all doing so well in school, and Annabelle's graduating this year. She should be with her friends, not surrounded by strangers. And the Christmas pageant. We can't leave before I do the Christmas pageant. They'll never find someone else to direct it. Hey, Hammer said, taking her by the shoulders. Don't get ahead of yourself, Carol. Shar hasn't even called yet. Maybe they'll let it pass. I doubt it, Carol sniffed, grabbing a tissue from the box on the counter. The department's full of meddlers, and they've had a grudge against your family for years. They'd love to get anything on you. But I saved a kid's life, Carol. Even Shar's got to pay attention to that. Carol gave a watery smile. I hope so. You deserve the attention. I didn't mean it that. I know, but it's true anyway. She gave him a quick kiss. Let's get the kids to bed, and then we can talk it all over while I clean the kitchen. I'll get the baby ready, Annabelle offered. That would be great. Becky, let's brush your teeth. But I'm hungry, the little girl said plaintively. Then finish your spaghetti. I can't eat the spaghetti! Carol put a hand over her face. She had almost forgotten about that. All right, baby, I'll make you a sandwich. But then you go to bed, you hear me? Tomorrow's a school day, and you are not going to be late. End of chapter 1. If you want more, let me know, and I'll send you the rest. A Winter's Tale by Sarah Hudson.